Welcome to Holly Madison's Memoir. Viewer discretion is advised due to the contents in the book, and we're going to pick up where we last left off. A few days before the annual Playboy Halloween bash, I had come down with a nasty case of the flu. I curled up in bed all day, barely able to move a muscle or even lift my head off the pillow. Unbeknownst to me, Hef had recently found out about Vicky's guest list scam and confronted her. He was furious with Vicky and the Mean Girls. When some of the names on the guest list aroused suspicion, the paying customers were called by one of Hef's secretaries asking how they got the invite. They simply told the secretary that they paid one of the girls to get in. Amazingly, Vicky had neglected to tell them it was a secret. Needless to say, they were totally busted, and even Vicky couldn't deny it. Of course, the evil witch was convinced that somehow I had been the one to snitch, even though I hadn't even known about the scheme at that point. Part of me wishes I could now take credit for what would be her demise, but it was not my doing. None of that mattered because regardless of what I did or didn't do, Vicky was hell-bent on making my life miserable. Honey, we're home! Vicky squealed through the doors of the master bedroom, dragging out each word in a sing-song childlike tone. Terrified they were going to get kicked out, Vicky and the Mean Girls had all gone to a local tattoo parlor to get bunny head logos inked on their ankles, an expression of their undying devotion to Playboy and Hef. Honey, she cooed again, only louder. Uninvited, she flung open the doors and screeched like nails on a chalkboard. We have something to show you. He's in the library, I croaked from what felt like my deathbed. What? Vicky shouted as if she was shocked I dare even speak to her. Leaving the other girls in her wake, she charged up to my side of the bed, her nostrils flaring like an enraged bull, and her fists clenched at her side. She came on so aggressively I worried she might hit me. It wasn't out of the question. I'd seen some of the girlfriends resort to throwing punches over things as trivial as someone cutting the bathroom line at the nightclub. But I'd never seen Vicky so incensed before. I think mansion life was eating away at her. She had become desperate, paranoid, and apparently volatile. Panicking, I felt my sore muscles tense, preparing for a blow. He's in the library, I croaked again, a bit softer, praying that they would all just leave. He's in the library, Vicky shrieked, raising her pitch in an attempt, I assumed, to mock me. She was hovering over my quivering body, her eyes crazed, and a vicious smile creasing her puffed lips. I stiffened, half preparing myself to turn towards the door. I had no idea what had set Vicky off this time. Fuck! One of the girls shouted, sounding similarly enraged. Let's go! Relief washed over me as Vicky turned around and began stomping away. Suddenly, she spun around and at the top of her lungs screamed, "Fucking bitch!" and slammed the heavy door so hard the pictures on the walls shook, as if an earthquake had rattled the house. What had just happened? I thought, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I took a few slow, deep breaths to calm myself so that I could process the encounter. I was so rattled that I lay in bed, paralyzed by fear, praying that Hef would return quickly. It felt like hours before Hef finally returned to the bedroom. He relayed the story to me about how he had caught the girls adding names to the party guests and how upset he had been at each of them. For a moment, I felt relief. Oh my God, I thought. He's going to kick them out. They're actually going to be gone. But when he got to the part where they had gone to get their bunny brands as a sign of loyalty and how very sorry they all seemed, his eyes started to gleam with pride as a small smile appeared on his face. His voice was shaking in that way that it did whenever he told a story that touched him. Are you fucking kidding me? I thought. He wasn't actually falling for this. Was he? You mean you're really not going to do anything? I asked, my raspy voice barely escaping my mouth. What do you mean? Hef asked, truly befuddled. I could sense he was shocked by my response. They are genuinely sorry, Holly. They said they didn't mean to hurt me, and are now more devoted than ever. I didn't say anything, but it was clear my silence spoke volumes, so he continued. They said they're going to put in a lot more time around here, he proudly stated. They even expressed an interest in coming in and watching movies with us at night. Do you know Diana actually loves black and white movies? I could feel the tears burning my eyes as I tried to hold them back. Of course I didn't know Diana liked old movies. Because she didn't. All the mean girls rolled their eyes behind Hef's back whenever he made mention of his beloved black and white films. Hef and I usually watched movies alone most weeknights, which for me was a much needed reprieve from having to be around all the other girls. Surely the mean girls would have made good on their promises to Hef, not only in order to stay in his good graces, but also to drive me crazy with their ever obnoxious presence. There was no way I could tolerate any more around those girls than I already had to. No, I thought, I won't. I just couldn't stay any longer. I can't believe you aren't going to do anything, I cried, tears now cascading down my cheeks. I can't stay here anymore. I can't live in a house with Vicky, someone who is that mean to me. Even though we never talked about it, Hef knew the girls were terrible to me. He just chose not to do anything about it. This is my house, Hef screamed at me, his face red with anger. How dare you complain to me? I treat you like a princess. More like Rapunzel, I thought. I shifted my gaze downward and refused to react to his tantrum, which luckily proved to be short-lived. Hef calmed down just as quickly as he got upset. Well, I'm hesitant to get rid of Vicky, because other girls seem to really like her, he said thoughtfully, folding his hands in his lap. This was code, of course, for her ability to recruit other girls into the bedroom. While he knew I was in the room, I wasn't completely sure if he was talking to me or just aloud, so I kept quiet. As he sat there weighing his options, I felt defeated. Supposedly, I was the love of his life, as he liked to say. But he was weighing my worth against Vicky's. We sat in silence for a long while. Maybe no one would recognize me as a former Playboy mistress, I thought. That was it. I would leave the mansion for good, my bunny tail tucked between my legs, and Vicky would win. Just as I was about to pull myself from the haze I'd been living under, Hef broke the silence. Well, you know, he conceded, I think Vicky was the ringleader in this whole thing. She really was the one that led those girls astray. I held my breath as he surely pondered this poor little damsel being manipulated by her. I think I'll tell her it's time for her to leave after the Halloween party, he said matter-of-factly, as he picked up the bedside telephone to order his dinner. I didn't say a word. Even to express my gratitude might unintentionally change his mind. I just nodded as if the decision was an unemotional, practical one. On the inside, I was bouncing off the walls with happiness. Vicky was going to be kicked out. But on the outside, I had to remain calm and unaffected. I knew the battle was over, but I was careful not to rock the boat. That's always how things were at the mansion. You were constantly fighting just to stay afloat, to keep yourself from being kicked out onto the street. Losing sight of what it was I had even wanted before moving in, I became obsessed with being the last one standing in this perverted elimination game. I was determined to win. Chapter 6. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice, because I'm not myself, you see. And that is from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In just 1 year, I had gone from the newest member of Hef's party posse to the one with the most seniority. Tina, Vicky, April, Lisa, Candace, and Carolyn had all gone their separate ways. In their place was an entirely new cast of characters. Bridget, my sole friend, Daphne, a pretty, cunning girl who quickly became one of Hef's favorites. Diana, Hef adored her because she had the helpless damsel in distress act down pat. Elizabeth, one of Daphne's sidekicks, who was low on the totem pole because Hef found her shrill and demanding. Whitney, at 30, the oldest girlfriend and Hef's least favorite because he considered her pushy. And finally, Amber, a seemingly sweet as sugar, quiet girl who defected from side to side when it came to the battle between the mean girls and me. While the girls were different, some things never changed. With the exception of Bridget, I was no more successful in making friends with this group of girls than with the last. To make matters worse, since none of these new girls were being given the Playmate pictorials they so badly wanted, they therefore weren't kept busy with photo shoots, video shoots, and promotional appearances like the last batch of girls had been. With all the extra time the new girls had to spend at the mansion, counting their frustrations, the claws were perpetually out. The Wednesday and Friday nightclub outings, which had seemed so exciting to me when I first joined the group, became dreadfully monotonous, not just to me, but to all of the girls. On Wednesdays, we would go to Concord or the Standard Lounge, and on Fridays, we would go to the upscale, but not star-studded, Barfly on Sunset Boulevard. Since there were no celebrities to be seen at Barfly, the girls hated it and referred to it as Barf Fly, behind Hef's back. Each night out would begin with a limo ride to the nightclub, with Hef passing out his thigh-opening quaaludes to the girls in attendance. I still refused them, but many girls didn't. The evening out would always end with the girlfriends trying to convince Hef to go home a little earlier than usual. He usually insisted on staying out until 1 a.m., but on the rare occasion he agreed to leave early. We all breathed a collective sigh of relief. Daphne, Diana, and Elizabeth would beg Hef to bring us to cooler night spots instead of Barf Fly, but he was loath to change his routine. Also, his cachet on the nightclub scene had subsided over the past year. He had been going out so often, he was no longer a novelty, and he was too high maintenance, always bringing a huge group and always demanding the best booth in the house for the A-list clubs to be bothered with him anymore. The dreaded bedroom routine still went on after each club night, but the parade of new girls joining the antics had subsided. In fact, anytime a woman the girls found to be a potential threat got too close to Hef, one of them, I was never sure who, would give her a friendly warning that herpes was going around the mansion and she would instantly back off. The rumor gained such momentum that I was witness to 2 instances of girls who had slept with Hef. One was a former girlfriend, one was a week-long fling, calling his office and asking that he pay for their herpes medication, even though he grumbled about how he received a full physical every year. Therefore, it couldn't have been him that they got herpes from. He always ended up paying for the medication. I suppose he did it to keep them quiet and make them go away. Shit, as far as Hollywood is concerned, more of them have herpes than what they don't, from what I've heard. But that's just the word on the curb. I don't know if it's true, because I'm not in that sort of social scene. Daytime at the mansion was still as uneventful as ever. Looking for something to occupy our time, Bridget and I became official mansion tour guides. The job required that we familiarize ourselves with every fact about every nook and cranny of the 21,987 square foot house and the 5.3 acre property. We hosted the frequent morning tours, mostly to servicemen and charity raffle winners, and we were given custom bunny costumes made specifically for us, which was a real treat considering that even playmates weren't allowed to keep theirs. While most people use the term Playboy bunny to describe anyone associated with the magazine or Hef, the term actually refers to the waitresses who wore the bunny costumes at the Playboy clubs, which existed in the middle part of the last century. In the absence of these clubs, playmates occasionally donned the costumes for photo shoots or public appearances. I spent a lot of time in the Mansion's zoo, learning about the animals from the wonderful zoo staff. Hundreds of exotic birds and 3 types of monkeys called the grounds home. I made friends with a large spider monkey named Coco, whom we eventually trained to be able to walk around on a leash. One day, as a favor to Hef, I decided to take on the project of organizing his bedroom. Yikes, girl. I love organizing, but when it comes to somebody that's a hoarder, that is the most mind-numbing, frustrating task to complete because they want to keep everything. Even for someone with a lot of time on her hands, it was a formidable task that ended up taking several days. Well, shit, I thought it would have taken several weeks. From the first time I'd ever seen the inside of his bedroom to my days as his main girlfriend, Hef had managed to collect even more junk. A recent Premiere magazine profile of Hef had referred to his room as the lair of the Playboy pack rat. One of his prominent collections was his film library. At that time, many of the films he had collected were still languishing in stacks on his bedroom floor in the form of 3/4-inch tapes, which looked like larger versions of traditional VHS tapes, all in generic gray clamshell cases. My main order of business was carrying all the tapes upstairs and filing them in one of his mini video closets so they could await conversion to DVD by his video staff, who also operated as human TiVo, taping every television program he circled in the TV guide. This ended up becoming quite the workout. I must have climbed up and down those stairs more than 300 times, carrying heavy stacks of tapes. It was particularly unpleasant when I unearthed a tape and realized it was coated in years-old dog urine. As the piles diminished, ornately carved walls I had never seen, and which probably hadn't seen the light of day in a decade, appeared. While it felt so good to see the room come together, I must say I found some things I would have rather not seen. Topping the list, an old reel stashed away in a drawer full of corn, labeled Girl and Dog. It made me wonder if Hef had ever thought about who was going to go through his things one day after he passed away. He was so fastidious about his public image and about having every moment in his life documented and recorded in a way that showed his life the way he wanted it shown. I was disheartened to learn from one of his friends that he had plans to donate his scrapbook collection to a library or university after he passed, though he hadn't settled on which one at that point. It was such a personal and private collection, not just for him, but for anyone who'd ever been in his life. Hef holds the Guinness Book of World Records title for largest scrapbook collection at over 2,000 volumes. He keeps them in his attic along with desks and supplies for his scrapbook staff. Yes, he has a scrapbook staff to paste everything together, good or bad. Anything written about him goes in the scrapbook. Every picture his photographers take ends up in the scrapbook. Every girl he takes out is pictured in the photos. And the insinuation that they slept together is there, along with nude photos in some cases. I'm sure many girls included in the scrapbooks wouldn't be too thrilled to learn they could be public property one day soon. I know I wasn't. Granted, there wasn't anything scandalous about me in the scrapbooks, but it was humiliating to think that anything personal I had trusted him with could end up public property via their inclusion there, even if it was just something trivial like a sad note I had written to him. It was another thing that made me feel embarrassed, trapped, and forever branded. In another attempt to occupy my time and my brain, I began taking French lessons, acting classes, and real estate investment courses at UCLA. I needed to do something to stimulate my mind and avoid permanent bimbo status. The stammer I had developed continued to creep into my speech, and I hoped that furthering my education might somehow help. Bridget and I truly were kindred spirits. She had already received her master's degree, but felt the weight of mansion life affecting her head too, and began taking classes as well. The classes were the only part of my day that didn't in some way revolve around impressing Hef or conforming to his rules. He couldn't have cared less about what I was learning. To him, a woman's beauty is her most powerful asset, unless, of course, she happens to be famous. Above all things, Hef is fascinated with fame, both his and other people's. He is obsessed with cataloging his life as a public figure and keeps records of every press interview he's ever done. Celebrity is one of the few things that can't be bought, and Hef prides himself greatly on his 60-plus years in the spotlight. Whenever even the most Z-list celebrity would grace him with his or her presence, Hef would drop everything to accommodate the star. It made me feel so incredibly insignificant, and it was embarrassing to watch him act even cheesier and more fake than he usually did. Hef never even bothered to introduce us to his guest, as if we were some lifeless mannequins unworthy of such an honor. While I had always dreamed of one day becoming an actress, it wasn't until I lived at the mansion that I began craving fame strictly for fame's sake. In some corner of my mind, I thought that maybe if I became famous, I would have some value. Perhaps I would earn Hef's respect after all. Maybe I could even score a pictorial in the magazine. My life had become so backwards. I had once looked at a Playboy pictorial as a stepping stone to an acting career. But over the past few years, I had become so absorbed by Playboy that I started seeing fame as a stepping stone to a pictorial. I was completely coming undone. "We have pink pussies!" a loud baby voice blonde shrieked, charging past security in our roped-off table at one of our regular night spots. Hef adored Paris Hilton before she became a household name with her television show The Simple Life. Paris was a notorious socialite who was regularly mentioned along with her sister Nikki in Page 6. With some sort of murky pink liquid, these shots were the pink pussies Paris referred to. I thought it was called wet pussy. Either way, it's a good shot. I've had it before. That's probably the only time I'd ever say I'd have that in my mouth. But anyways, sloshing out the tops of 3 shot glasses, Paris squeezed her way into our VIP section of the club. Like clockwork, Hef motioned for us to scoot down to make room next to him for Paris. According to Hef, she was a celebrity, even though her meteoric rise to fame was still months away. I took it upon myself to always take note when a celebrity would make the effort to introduce him or herself to us, or even simply blanket the group with a simple, "Hi, girls." Many of them ignored us entirely and spoke to Hef as if he were the only person in the room. Since Paris took the time to introduce herself, she fell into the nice category. It was the heyday of the club scene in Los Angeles, so we would see Paris around semi-regularly. She always made a point to come over and say hello to us, and each time Hef would just beam like a perverted grandfather. At one point, I heard she even began discussing the possibility of doing a pictorial with Playboy photo editor Marilyn Grabowski. But a few weeks later, Paris, in the lowest low-rise jeans, the skimpiest blue top, and the darkest spray tan I had ever seen, appeared tableside during one of our club nights at the Standard Lounge to speak with Hef. I noticed she seemed more subdued than usual as she leaned into his good ear. She appeared to be explaining something to him. When she eventually walked away, Hef turned towards me and said she can't pose for the magazine because her mother said she would disinherit her. Okay, Kathy was just playing some hardball because, as we know, or if you don't, I read House of Hilton. I didn't finish it. Shit. Anyways, though, in that book, Kathy was raised by a mother who was fame hungry, and she basically exploited Kathy, Kim Richards, and Kyle Richards because she wanted one of them girls to make it so they would be famous, and Kim was the one to make it. But Big Kathy Hilton's mom, that was all that she based everything off of, was fame. That's how you got in her good graces. So to hear that Kathy Hilton would disinherit Paris if she posed for Playboy lets me know that was a fucking lie. They were playing hardball and probably just wanted to get her the best spot in the magazine for the best price. Like, really, that's what it came down to. And that's just my opinion, though. But anyway, whether that was true or if it was just an excuse she made up in order to back out of the discussions, I don't know. Right before her new Fox reality show aired, Paris' now infamous sex tape surfaced, making her the most talked about woman on the planet. Which is why Kim Kardashian did the same thing that Paris did. Anyways, One Night in Paris quickly became one of the best-selling porn videos of all time. Posing nude for Playboy wouldn't have been nearly as controversial as her sex tape. What nude photos did for Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s, sex tapes were now doing for 21st century starlets. The Simple Life premiered to more than 13 million viewers. And from what I know, from what I've heard, is that Kathy was supportive of Paris putting that out because then she would get that celebrity status that she was desperately wanting at the time. Which is how the Kardashians got the idea. Kris got that idea because of what Kathy and Paris did. Then Kris and Kim took that and ran a mile with it, okay? Sorry, that's just a soapbox I could get on and stay on, but I'm gonna leave it now and we're gonna get back to the book. I certainly wasn't planning on ever making a sex tape, but any TV appearances I could get, even if it was just as Bunny number 2, I jumped on. Given our roles as mansion tour guides, Bridget and I were often drafted to help play hostess when television shows came to film. During a shoot for MTV's Doggy Fizzle Televizzle, Bridget and I gave Snoop Dogg the official tour. When MTV returned to shoot an episode of Viva La Bam on the property, I was asked to be the bunny who interacted with the cast. Desperate to swipe the spotlight away from me, Daphne came to crash the shoot, but her spot ended up on the cutting room floor. Shucks. When MTV Cribs shot a Playboy Mansion episode, only one girlfriend could fit in the doorway alongside Hef for the opening shot, and since I was his main girlfriend, I got the part. I still remember that episode clear as day, and I only watched it like the one time, but yet I can still vividly remember that MTV Cribs episode and Holly being on it with her short blonde hair. The crew took a liking to me and asked that I lead them along on the tour. One of the other girls in particular tried shoving her face on camera as much as she could. She was green with envy that I was getting this opportunity and rolled her eyes whenever they asked me to say something on film. Rarely would a request come through to shoot all the girlfriends together, but before the holidays one year, a Los Angeles news station asked to film a segment with all the girls in our pajamas in front of the mansion's Christmas tree. Hef insisted we each wear the same matching oversized flannel pajamas he kept in bulk in his closet, but I decided to wear my own slim-fitting pajamas with red Playboy bunny heads printed on them. Hef was extremely offended and demanded that I march back upstairs and put on the de rigueur pink flannels. Was I one of his children? I refused. I hated having to conform, especially to this group of girls. I also found his baggy, faded flannel pajamas terribly unflattering. I wasn't granted permission to wear my outfit of choice without yet another argument complete with flowing tears from Hef. He later apologized for being so upset after he saw the other girls pile around the tree with deliberate markers of their own, a yellow duck beanie, a Pomeranian puppy, etc. I wasn't the only one desperate to stand out. Those TV spots were fun, but I was really excited when Fox started shooting a reality television show called Who Wants to Be a Playboy Centerfold? The show was intended to be a series, but ended up getting cut down into just a one-time special. I thought this could be a chance for me to learn more about the behind-the-scenes operations of television. And who knows, maybe even get discovered myself. The show was shot mainly in a ranch-style home across the street from the mansion that Hef had recently purchased, which we would later take to calling the Bunny House. 12 contestants vying for a chance at a Playboy centerfold were moved into the house, 3 or 4 girls to a room. The girls would participate in several photo shoot challenges as they were eliminated one by one. Finally, a winner would be chosen to be Miss July of that year. Much to my dismay, Hef deliberately kept his girlfriends far, far away from the production. Desperately bored with my day-to-day life, I became obsessed with learning every behind-the-scenes detail about this television special. I even snuck into the living room during a production meeting to listen in as Hef clandestinely discussed the next round of contestant eliminations with the producers. I casually flopped down into a pile of pillows in the corner of the room so I could secretly hear their conversation. "We have to keep her. She's the bitch," a female producer exclaimed after Hef pointed out who he would like to eliminate next. "She makes great television." "I don't know. I think she's a little overweight," Hef grumbled. "She's right. We need to keep her," an enthusiastic male voice chimed in. "She's confrontational with the other girls in the house. She adds conflict." "Okay, well, we'll keep her for the next round and see how it works out," Hef slowly acquiesced. Wow, I thought. I was familiar with America's Next Top Model, the show that this Playmate competition show appeared to be based on, and never would have guessed that contestants were kept on strictly to stir the pot. It made sense, but in the early days of reality TV, viewers weren't as wise to the process as they are now. Interestingly enough, the girl Hef had deemed overweight became a favorite of a Playboy photo editor, and her centerfold was so well produced, Hef ended up selecting it as the winner. Since viewers wouldn't be happy with an antagonist winning the competition, the show was quickly re-edited to take out those pot-stirring bitch moments and make the winner look like America's sweetheart. By the way, I always found the winner to be a nice person. I suppose she was a little more honest and blunt than the rest of the contestants, hence the bitch label that people like to throw onto assertive women. Anything is possible, I thought. Maybe Hef will one day change his mind about my chances of being a centerfold too. The television special was just the latest in a slew of media opportunities Hef had begun participating in over the past few years. 2 of the most substantial documentaries, titled Playboy, The Party Continues, in 2000, and Inside the Playboy Mansion, filmed before my arrival in 2001, followed Hef's new life as a 70-something swinger. Anytime a Playboy-related program aired, it scored fantastic ratings. Middle America was still buying into the intrigue and racy glamour of the Playboy world, made interesting again by Hef's reemergence onto the social scene. Hef loved the documentaries that covered his life, but he also loved any chance to cross over to a younger audience. He was obsessed with appearing hip and relevant, which is how we found ourselves doing press in the middle of a Justin Timberlake video shoot in the mansion's backyard. "So, do you listen to hip-hop?" the MTV reporter asked. Hef began, seemingly at a loss for words. In early 2003, Justin Timberlake was at the top of his game. You couldn't spend more than 10 minutes at any nightclub in Los Angeles before hearing a track from his latest album, Justified. So much so, I still can't listen to a single song without being overcome by painful memories. When a request came through Playboy asking to shoot a music video at the mansion for the Nelly track Work It, featuring Justin Timberlake, the answer was, of course, yes. When it came time to shoot the video, the director offered Hef and his girlfriend small roles. Because some of the other models in the video were topless, it was deemed too racy for the United States and only aired internationally. During the shoot, Hef sat in his own wooden throne-like chair, bobbing along to the beat and wearing black sunglasses, with Nelly and Justin Timberlake on either side of him while we danced around them in skimpy outfits. After filming Wrapped, Hef was asked to do an interview with MTV News. All the girlfriends gathered around Hef, and I took my place at his immediate right. Hef continued to fumble. This non-response was completely out of the ordinary. Usually he was a pro at these interviews, able to call upon a laundry list of canned responses to just about any question you can imagine. I listened to Hef rattle off the same answers he'd given a million times before, often word for word. I think I had unintentionally memorized some of them myself. He struggled for so long, it was becoming awkward, and I feared the reporter had only asked about hip-hop to trip up the 76-year-old man, so I decided to cut in. You listened to it out at the clubs, I offered, looking at Hef with a warm smile, aware that all eyes were on me. Yes, Hef said, regaining some composure. We listen to it when we go out. He coasted through the rest of the interview on his Rolodex of previously used responses, and we wrapped. When I finally managed to get up to the master bedroom to change out of the red skirt and lace-cropped halter I had worn for the video, Hef had beaten me there and was already standing in front of the bathroom sink. You, he began loudly when I appeared in the doorways, have no answers. You are to keep quiet during interviews. Sorry, I was just trying to help, I mumbled as I darted around the corner into the vanity. My eyes started filling with tears, as they did almost daily back then. I was to keep quiet, I repeated in my head. He was treating me like a dog. Sit, stay, no barking. Only I'd never seen him so mean towards his animals. I had tried to help my boyfriend navigate a sticky situation, and now I was being punished for it, which made the reprimand hurt all the more. Despite his many abuses, I had grown protective of Hef and felt like the interviewer could easily have made him look like a fool. In the few years I'd been at the mansion, I'd never seen a question throw him so entirely off his game. What if the producers decided not to be kind that day? The way he was sputtering in front of the camera, they could have easily made him look like a senile old coot. But he clearly would rather have looked like an idiot than get help from one of his dumb blondes. When would I ever catch a break? I wondered. For the magazine's 50th anniversary, A&E wanted to shoot a TV special to air on the network. The program included a party at the mansion, celebrating the magazine's iconic run and honoring Playboy's most famous playmates. As girlfriends, we had no role beyond getting glammed up and sitting quietly next to Hef. But I used it as an opportunity to try to give myself a much-needed boost of self-esteem. I decided to treat myself to something really special, a red Jessica Rabbit-inspired Barachi gown that cost a few $1,000s. I never spent that much on clothing, since I was trying to put away as much money as I could, but I felt I finally deserved the treat. I always remembered how stunning the Bentley twins looked in their glamorous Barachi gowns, and seeing as though this was an extra special event, I figured I could splurge. You know, you will look back on this time as the best time of your life, Mary had said to me after one of my vent sessions. All the dressing up and things you get to do. I trusted Mary and always told her how I felt. But if this is the best time of my life, shoot me now, I thought. Foolishly, I'd long believed that becoming a Playboy centerfold was the fast track to fame and fortune. Boy, was I wrong. There have been more than 720 Playmates in Playboy's history. How many of them can you name? Even if I did happen to score a pictorial someday, it didn't necessarily mean anything beyond validation. More than ever, I had begun to accept that I would never achieve anything greater than my role as Hef's main girlfriend. The handful of Playmates who had become famous were all in attendance that night. Playmate and TV personality Jenny McCarthy hosted the event. Her beauty is matched by her wit. She ended up being the best part of the show by far, which included musical numbers and stand-up acts. 90s Playmate stars Anna Nicole Smith and Pamela Anderson were also in attendance. Barbie Benton, Hef's main girlfriend in the 60s and 70s, attended the soiree. While not technically a Playmate, Barbie was featured in several pictorials and on 4 Playboy covers. Hef went out of his way to keep in touch with many of his ex-girlfriends, partly out of sentimental sentimentality, but also, I believe, as a form of damage control. Keeping in the good graces of his ex-girlfriends was a sort of insurance policy. I guess he figured the regular invites back to the mansion would keep anyone from speaking negatively about him. Barbie would end up becoming a regular guest star on The Girls Next Door, and I ended up really liking her. She was quirky, friendly, and creative. Barbie wasn't a close confidant, though. Despite having dated the same man, we couldn't really relate on that subject. Sure, Hef was much older than she was when they dated. Old enough to be her father, though, not her grandfather. Plus, Barbie didn't have to share Hef publicly. He wasn't faithful to her by any means, but she could at least pretend the other women didn't exist. Never was she forced to one side or the other to make room for a gaggle of giggling blondes to line up around him. It was a surprise to me how mannered and reserved many of the former playmates were, despite presenting Hef with a birthday cake totally nude while filming an episode of Girls Next Door. Pam Anderson always struck me as incredibly guarded and quite shy. Spending a decade being chased by paparazzi must have made her cautious around people. Like Pam, Anna Nicole was surprisingly quiet and very polite. I met the towering blonde only briefly, but she exuded the charm and etiquette of a real Southern belle. Like most former playmates, they were cordial with Hef, but I don't believe they knew him very well. During the Pam Anna Nicole era, he was married to Kimberly and didn't socialize with the playmates much, if at all. Needless to say, those playmates didn't have to endure the playmate casting couch that existed after the end of his marriage. I was beyond thrilled to meet 1950s pinup Betty Page, a living legend. While her hair had long ago turned gray, she still wore it neatly styled with those short iconic bangs. In her later years, Betty became a born-again Christian and conducted herself like the gentle church-going lady she was. Her name and likeness had become popular again in the 90s, and it was Hef and his friend, Mark Rosler, who found Betty and reconnected her with the business end of her pinup past. As a small memento, I gave Betty a Miss January necklace to commemorate her January 1955 centerfold. She later told me she hung it on her wall so she could always look at it. When she passed away in 2008, I was heartbroken, but grateful that we were able to have met. Despite the odds, a part of me still held on to my dream of one day becoming a famous Playboy playmate. And after meeting these iconic women that night, I felt like I should at least try to make my dream come true. "Do you think I could ever be a playmate?" I squeaked nervously to Hef, my voice coming out even higher pitched than usual. I held my breath. After living at the mansion for quite some time, I finally got up the nerve to ask about the possibility point blank. I spit the question out one evening while he was reviewing playmate videos in his room. "I knew you would eventually ask that," he replied solemnly, his eyes still focused on the video. Finally, he let out a sigh and said, "I don't think so, Holly. There are a lot of blondes scheduled for upcoming months already." A massive lump formed in my throat. Okay, I thought, fighting back the tears. I can take that. It seemed reasonable. Too many blondes. "Besides," he continued, now looking directly at me, "you don't have the look. You just don't photograph well." "Oh," I said slowly, careful to keep my voice from quivering. "Right." I'd always felt that Hef didn't think I was very pretty, and that he thought I was lucky to be living at the mansion. But hearing him basically say that hurt even worse than I could have imagined. I had prepared myself for a negative response, but I had thought that he would have been more tactful. Luckily, his eyes remained riveted on the TV screens, so I could wipe away my tears discreetly. "I'd let you shoot for Cybergirl, though," he offered, as if it were some kind of consolation prize. Playboy.com featured a new Cybergirl each week. These were usually just photos pulled from the rejected Playmate test shoots. It was a throwaway offer. He knew it. I knew it. And I wasn't interested in becoming and being one of the many girls haphazardly tossed online without ceremony. If I was going to take the leap and pose nude for the world to see, I wanted to become Playmate of the Month. But then I thought maybe posing for a Cybergirl shoot would show Hef that he was wrong about me. Perhaps the photos would actually turn out good enough that he'd have to reconsider me for Playmate. On the other hand, if the photos were a total disaster, maybe all those flaws that he saw in me were real, and I'd finally be forced to face them dead on. Was I so hideous that I couldn't be a Playmate? Okay, open your knees a little wider, directed the photographer, as I sat facing the camera on a red sofa without a stitch of clothing on my body. The shoot took place at the Bunny House, the brightly colored mid-century home right across the street from the mansion. Naturally, I was a bit anxious, but Sarah, the makeup artist, who has since become a good friend, made me feel at ease. The photographers were tired of the heavy-handed 90s style makeup Hef still liked on Playmates. Since this was not a Playmate shoot, they took the opportunity to use a more natural style, which I ended up liking. When the stylist wheeled in the wardrobe options on a metal clothing rack, my stomach tied itself in knots. As Hef's main girlfriend, they wanted me in a short satin kimono robe, touting a plastic prop pipe. Say that 3 times fast. No, thank you. To pay homage to my boyfriend. The Hef tribute had been done once before by his second wife, Kimberly, and would be done again by his third wife, Crystal. The remaining selections felt more downscale stripper than the old Hollywood glamour style that I would have preferred. Can't you see too much? I asked timidly. This was Playboy, I thought, not Hustler. No, you can't see anything from this angle if you lean forward, the photographer reassured. I swear. Okay, confession. I did a boudoir style shoot. I did have a woman photographing me though, but at one point she was like, okay, spread your legs wider. And I was thinking like, girl, you're about to see all my business. Like, I am not about, And she was like, no, seriously, do it. And then when I saw the pictures and how they turned out, it was astonishing to me that you couldn't see a thing because I felt overly exposed. But yet in the picture, you would have known nothing of that. I just felt the need to share that for some reason. But anyway, the photographer assigned wasn't one of the 2 used to shoot the Playboy pictorials, and I was worried that I was wasting my time. Since I wasn't getting the opportunity to shoot with the best of the best, I was terrified that my photos weren't going to be the home run I had hoped they would be. Despite what my gut was telling me, I continued with the shoot. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or bratty. How did the shoot go? Hef asked when I appeared in the master bedroom after a long day, which included a car wash scene in February. I was cold and exhausted and wanted nothing more than to shower and crawl into my pajamas. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. I don't know if I'll like the photos. When the slides came back, Playboy was still shooting on film in 2003. I hated them. As I predicted, they were far more explicit than I wanted them to be. I felt like a fool for listening to that photographer. Adding insult to injury, the slides were accompanied by a memo from Playboy's Chicago photo editor, saying something to the effect of, Hef, do you want us to use these? They look like they were shot in your room with her wearing your robe and smoking your pipe. The comment made it sound like I was some interloper sneaking around the Playboy mansion taking photos without permission. Was the editor not aware that I was Hef's girlfriend? I felt so embarrassed. Usually Hef made such a public fuss over whoever his main girlfriend was. I felt like I was the first one he neglected to do that with. It made me feel like I was not beautiful or glamorous enough to merit such praise. In hindsight, I know he was just sick of the high turnover with his past girlfriends. They were lasting on average about 6 months, and he was done floating any girl's ego. He had come to the conclusion that if he kept us broken and needy, we would stay. Broken and needy were definitely 2 adjectives that perfectly described me during that time. After about a year of stubbornly trying to maintain some semblance of individuality, I finally gave up on my short hair and started wearing clip-in extensions to give me the long hair Hef preferred. I was feeling more disconnected than ever from the goals I once had. Mansion life had eaten away at my self-esteem. I found myself constantly trying to compete with the other girlfriends who were all caught up in who was prettiest. It was a perpetual contest to see who could be the skinniest, tannest, bustiest, most baby-faced, with the longest, whitest hair. We were all striving to win. We were all trying so hard to stand out and be coined the hottest of Hef's harem that we completely missed the fact that we were making ourselves indistinguishable from one another. After thinking about it for a few days, I finally worked up the courage to ask Hef to scrap my Cybergirl shoot. With a huge knot in my stomach, I explained that I wasn't really comfortable with the results and would rather the photos weren't floating around the internet. He assured me that he would let the Chicago office know, and he did, but only after the pictures had already been posted on Playboy.com for a few hours. The editor took them down immediately, but that doesn't mean much. Once something appears on the internet, it never really goes away. To this day, those photos are probably floating around somewhere. Oh well, I thought. I guess there could be worse things out there. While I was racking up disappointment after disappointment in the pursuit of my career, my social life at the mansion wasn't faring any better. Most of the other girlfriends seemed to hate me with a passion, though I never did anything to them besides keep my distance. Daphne was the alpha male of that group, and the other girls followed her like sheep. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Daphne would have loved to install Diana in my place as main girlfriend. They felt my role as main girlfriend was to be a sort of representative for the other girls and make sure that we continued to enjoy all the perks of living at the mansion. Under their breath, when they weren't making comments about my appearance, Daphne loved to make fun of my thin lips, since I was one of the few who didn't have my pout inflated with fillers. I'd overhear them make comments alluding to the fact that I didn't run things as well as Tina, since Hef had noticeably tightened his purse strings with the girlfriends in the past few years. The majority of the women who had done time at the mansion were born hustlers who knew how to milk a man for every last cent. That ability to manipulate just wasn't a part of my DNA. I was too timid, and besides, I actually liked Hef. I wasn't interested in scamming every penny I could get out of him. Prior to me, Hef's girlfriends were masters of the hustle. The Bentley twins were showered in lavish gifts. Rolex watches, fur coats, matching BMWs, designer gowns, and even furniture for their off-property apartments, which were also paid for by Hef. When the twins, along with Brandy Roderick, moved on, the original 7 moved in, and Hef decided to tighten up the purse strings. Still, Tina was skillfully calculating and was able to secure each girlfriend a leased car, a sizable wardrobe allowance, and lavish Christmas gifts. But it was nothing on the scale of what the twins had managed to bank. When Tina left the mansion, Hef tightened his belt even further. No shopping sprees, less allowance, and off-site apartments were now strictly forbidden. Anyone who joined the Playboy harem was after something. Most of the girlfriends were looking to get their pictorial and as much cash as humanly possible, like hookers on the clock. While I wasn't after Hef's money, I was just grateful to have a roof over my head. I too saw my stay at the mansion as a once-in-a-lifetime sort of thing that could lead to potential opportunities for my future. I don't care about money. I just want to be wonderful, was a Marilyn Monroe quote I lived by. I wasn't looking to get rich, but I was hungry for a career. I just wanted to accomplish something, anything. Sure, I believed I had come to care for Hef, but let's get real. It wasn't love at first sight, and I had my own set of goals. Greed just wasn't part of it. During a trip to New York City for Playboy's 50th anniversary party, one of many anniversary parties that would be held that year, Bridget, Amber, and I were excited to spend a few days touring the city in style. While Hef busied himself with press interviews, we spent time visiting Central Park, ice skating in Rockefeller Center, eating New York-style pizza, and jumping on the giant keyboard at FAO Schwartz on Fifth Avenue. As required, we invited the mean girls to join us, but they couldn't be bothered. Instead, they ran off to Bergdorf's and purchased 3 incredibly expensive designer handbags. Though Hef threw a fit about the purchase, he let them keep the bags. Well, Bridget, Amber, and I were focused on the experiences and actually liked some things about Hef and his lifestyle. The mean girls seemed to be focused only on the money. It felt like each side thought the other side prevented them from getting what they wanted. Knowing damn well what the previous roster of girls had been given, it seemed the girlfriends decided I was the reason their pockets weren't lined with cash and jewelry and decided to take matters into their own hands. "Holly, Hef would like to see you in his office," the secretary said through the phone line. The mean girls made sure I was routinely called down to the principal's office, so to speak. What was it this time, I thought. One girl in particular loved to whip up fictional stories about how I supposedly wronged her. Anytime she would get heat from Hef for not allowing his rules to a T, this happened constantly with most of the girlfriends. She loved to deflect attention from herself by making something up about me. Every time she made a mistake, it was somehow my fault. Though we had virtually nothing to do with each other, it was all bullshit. Hef saw through her. After all, she wasn't that clever, but he loved playing the game too much to call her out on her own lies. Being able to hold her stories over my head was just another tool Hef used to manipulate me. Watching me get upset and squirm was just another way he satisfied his perversions. Every year since I had moved into the mansion, I made a trip to Disneyland for my birthday. I expected all of the girlfriends to attend, simply because girlfriends were required to attend all planned events on Hef's schedule. But only Bridget, Amber, and my friend Brittany showed up. The message was received loud and clear. I was being boycotted. They were trying to convince Hef that things would be better if I weren't around, because after all, he was constantly saying that he just wanted harmony among the girls. I don't believe that he really wanted harmony. Not for a single minute. He thrived on catty drama among the women. Nothing made him feel more important than a bunch of girls fighting over him. At the time, though, we were all naive enough to believe what he told us. Unfortunately for the mean girls, their Disneyland boycott backfired. Not only did it make them look like pouty little children, which Hef hated, but it also allowed me to have the most enjoyable birthday celebration I'd had in a while. They wouldn't give up that easily, though. I'm running out of time, so I have to wrap up this part, and I hope to see you on the next one.